There is love that heals, and there is love that wounds, and sometimes they're the same thing. Fedre no Dolone's story in Kushiel's Chosen isn't just about intrigue and romance, wild spice. It's a meditation on pain, grace, and what it means to love in defiance of reason. Today, I want to talk about how Jacqueline Carey turns erotic fantasy into moral philosophy, and how Fedre becomes one of the most Kierkegaardian characters in modern fiction. Welcome to It Is That Deep, and our continuing exploration of Jacqueline Carey's Kushiel's Legacy series. As always, on this channel, spoiler warning. Everything will be told. No secrets will be held back. The story will be laid open. You have been warned. Okay, just a quick summary of where we are in the series. In Kushiel's Chosen, Fedre no Dolone, courtesan, spy, and angusette, chosen by the god of sacred pain and recently named noble and hero of the realm for her actions in Kushiel's Dart, check the information card for my analysis of that book, embarks on a journey across seas and empires to unravel the schemes of her nemesis and former lover, Melisande Scheherazade. The book opens right after the events of Kushiel's Dart, where Fedre tells Jacqueline that she is returning to her previous role as a servant of Namaha, a high-priced courtesan, in order to hunt Melisande and the traitors who still support her. And that brings us to the first philosophical analysis. Love as a paradox. Fedre and Jacqueline in the early part of the novel. Fedre and Jacqueline love each other very deeply, but their callings make them kinda incompatible. Jacqueline is bound to the Castline vow, celibacy, discipline, and obedience. Fedre, by contrast, is Kushiel's Chosen, an angusette, marked by divine pleasure and pain, and sworn to the goddess Namaha, the goddess of pleasure. She can no more renounce her nature than he can betray his faith, even though they did find that moment of love at the end of Dart. Their tragedy lies in this paradox. Each loves the other enough to break, but not enough to change what they are. There is this amazing scene in chapter 1 that sets this up. Fedre told Jacqueline that she's returning to the service of Namaha. He spent the night meditating in the garden, and she eventually fell asleep before the fire. And this is that scene. The sense of his presence woke me, and I opened my eyes. Jacqueline stood before me, dripping rainwater onto the carpeted flagstone. Even as I looked, he crossed his forearms and bowed. "In Kushiel's name," he said, his voice rusty from hours of disuse, "I protect and serve." We knew each other too well, we two, to dissemble. "No more than that?" "No more," he said steadily, "and no less." I sat in my chair, gazing up at his beautiful face, his blue eyes weary from his long vigil. "Can there be no middle ground between us, Jacqueline?" "No." He shook his head gravely. "Fedre, everyone knows I love you, but I am sworn to Kushiel. I cannot be two things, not even for you. I will honor my vow to protect and serve you, to the death if need be. You cannot ask for more. Yet you do." "I am Kushiel's Chosen, and sworn to Namaha," I whispered. "I honor your vow. Can you not honor mine?" "Only in my own way." He whispered too. I knew how much it cost him, and closed my eyes. "Fedre, do not ask for more." "So be it," I said with closed eyes. When I opened them, he was gone. Neither character is wrong in this moment, but both are doomed to suffer from loving without reconciliation. This tension is straight out of Soren Kierkegaard's Either Or, which is a boss title. He describes two modes of love in the book: the aesthetic, which seeks pleasure and passion, and the ethical, which seeks order and duty. Phaedra is the aesthetic. She lives through sensation and surrender. Jocelyn is the ethical. He lives through principle and restraint and his vow. Together they circle the impossible, the absurd reconciliation of two irreconcilable truths. Kierkegaard would say that this is the true burden of love, not romance, but the work of trying to reconcile what cannot be reconciled. In Either Or, he writes that the ascetic and the ethical are both incomplete on their own. Passion without principle dissolves into chaos, but duty without passion hardens into despair. In Works of Love, he goes even further, arguing that real love is not a feeling but a commandment, an act of will sustained through contradiction. Phaedra and Jocelyn are caught in that space between desire and duty, each demanding the other bridge an impossible gap. Their tragedy isn't that they love too little, but that they love so completely they refuse to betray what defines them. Love, in Carey's world, as in Kierkegaard's writing, is not harmony. It's faith in the face of difference, a wound that keeps the heart alive. But that wound can be resolved, the absurd can be bridged, and sometimes the darkest moments brings the greatest joy. So let's talk about La Dolorosa. During the events of the book, Phaedra discovers that Melisande must be somewhere in La Serenissima, which is basically Venice in that world. So, off Phaedra goes to La Serenissima and walks straight into Melisande's trap because Melisande has married Benedict de la Courcelle, Queen Ysandra's great uncle, and born him a pure-blood D'Angeline's son they plan to eventually put on the throne. So, Phaedra is captured by Melisande and put into the prison of La Dolorosa, which is an island prison, as Sailor describes as thus to Phaedra at one point. It is a Serenissiman superstition, my lady. They say that when Baal Jupiter slew Asherat's son, Eshmun, the gracious lady of the sea wept and raged and stamped her foot, and the floor of the sea rose up in answer, spewing forth La Dolorosa to mark her grief. La Dolorosa is one of Carey's most allegorical settings, a literal island of pain, a Dantean fortress where Phaedra confronts both her captivity and her own nature. You see, Melisande doesn't leave her there to rot. No. Melisande comes to La Dolorosa with an offer. Surrender to me, yield and be my plaything, and I'll release you from this place. Melisande's offer, freedom in exchange for submission, mirrors the oldest theological question in the world. Would you betray yourself to escape suffering? Phaedra almost does that. In her despair, she admits that she, Kushiel's chosen, can break. She resolves to take Melisande's offer. But Jocelyn, absurd, ethical, amazing Jocelyn, comes through for Phaedra. He hangs from the bridge of the prison upside down and makes his way to the island of La Dolorosa. He takes on the gods single-handedly. It's an incredible scene. And it's not quite enough to reunite them. Phaedra escapes, but is driven to the edge of the cliff of the island. She sees Jocelyn. He sees her. But there's a guy with a knife who will kill her before Jocelyn can reach her. So she jumps into the ocean. When Phaedra throws herself into the ocean to escape, she chooses faith. She prays and she jumps. when we get to book 3, eventually we'll talk about that dive into faith. But for here, it's enough to say we're starting to resolve the either-or dilemma. From a Kierkegaardian lens, Phaedra's leap into the ocean is the moment where love ceases to have any rational format and becomes faith. In either or, the aesthetic and the ethical can never truly reconcile. One must choose between them, hence the title, and that choice defines existence. But in later writings, Kierkegaard unlocks the third plane, faith, and Phaedra's jump isn't escape. It's the embrace of the paradox, the surrender to what Kierkegaard calls the inward passion of the infinite. In Works of Love, he writes that true love is a matter of conscience, not inclination. It demands that we act in love even when the outcome defies reason. By leaping, Phaedra chooses an absurd trust that love, in whatever form, will bear her through annihilation. And that moment is also one of death and rebirth, because it brings us to one of the most interesting philosophical questions, the ethical question of the scapegoat. Phaedra is rescued from the ocean by the pirate Kazan Atrabiades. Kazan is cursed by his act as a younger man of killing his little brother. The cry of bog prevents him from landing in his home port. It's a sort of spiritual monster. And when he tries to land there in order to put Phaedra ashore, a howling storm blows them out of the harbour and all the way to Crete, where the Thetalos ritual may be administered, and the Thetalos ritual will cleanse a person of blood guilt. It will cleanse Kazan. So he undergoes this ritual, but he stands at the point of failure during this testing, and Phaedra knows he's failing. So despite being told not to, she enters the cave where he's being tested and holds his hand, enduring the ritual without proper preparation, and she helps Kazan succeed. And in so doing, Phaedra absorbs some of Kazan's torment. She is his scapegoat. This theme is further deepened after the ritual when they go to the political heart of Crete. Here the slaves name her Lypheria, pain bearer. There's a very interesting scene about it where Phaedra finds out what it means that goes like this. "It is my pleasure, Lypheria," he murmured, not raising his eyes. It was the same form of address the Messias Chloris had used, and one that was strange to me. I sensed Demetrios Asterius' head come up sharply, and felt his measured gaze. "They call you that, do they?" he asked me. "I don't know, my lord," I said honestly. The wine-pourer had moved onward. "I heard it once before, only today. What does it mean?" He was silent for a moment, then answered thoughtfully. "Pain-bearer." Oh. Since I did not know what else to say, I gazed into my wine cup. A Lypheria, we learn later, is a person created to bear the pain of the gods. It is created, such a person is created as a scapegoat. They cannot choose whether they are thus created, they just are created thus. And while Phaedra didn't choose to be born as this, she does choose to embrace who she is, as we spoke about in the first episode of this video series. In light of her being this divine scapegoat, looking back at her absorbing Kazan's pain makes her into a very interesting philosophical entity, a willing scapegoat. And here we touch on Dostoevsky's and Le Guin's territory, that name. In the brothers Karamazov, Ivan rejects the idea of redemption built on another's suffering, saying, "I return my ticket. It's not worth the tears of a tortured child." Le Guin, in The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, imagines a utopia sustained by the misery of a single child. Everything is perfect for everyone, except the child who suffers in the dark. The moral choice offered to citizens is either to stay and with that knowledge or walk away. But in Kushiel's Chosen, we explore a different kind of scapegoat, one who chooses to be a scapegoat. And this is where Carey diverges from both Ivan and Omelas. Phaedra's pain is not exploitation. It's an offering. Yes, she's a scapegoat, but she becomes a scapegoat in part by her own consent, by embracing her fate. Bearing in mind that though she didn't choose to be born this way, she does choose how she reacts to it, and she embraces her fate, giving her consent and transforming her suffering into active grace. Kierkegaard reminds us that the greatest danger is not physical death, but the quiet loss of self, of living without meaning, in the sickness unto death. That's what separates Phaedra from the tortured child in Omelas, or the victims Ivan Karamazov mourns. They suffer without any agency. Their pain is meaningless because it's imposed without choice. But Phaedra's suffering, by contrast, is an act of will. She chooses to bear Kazan's agony, not because she must, but because love and compassion demand it. And in that choice, she refuses the rejection of Ivan and the resignation of Omelas' citizens. She turns the scapegoat's role from tragedy into transcendence, turning pain into participation, submission into agency, and despair into communion, simply by embracing her fate in love and compassion. It is a great leap inward. Phaedra does not lose herself in pain. She finds herself there, sanctifying it by choosing it freely. It's very Christ-like in its way, taking on the pain of others in the shape of the willing scapegoat. Anyway, the Satalos portion is one of my favorite parts of the book. And if you enjoyed it too, hit the thumbs up button and let me know what you thought in the comments. And let's move on to the last part of the book. Phaedra eventually gets back to La Serenissima and is reunited with Jacqueline, and their absurd love is reconciled through their faith in love itself and their understanding that as bad as it was to be together, it's worse to be apart. Now, Phaedra tells Jacqueline about Melisandre's treachery. She also finds out Queen Ysandra is coming to La Serenissima, and the plan is to assassinate the queen and park Prince Benedict on the throne with Melisandre and the baby at his side. Much shenanigans, daring-do, and incredible sword fight later, Melisandre's main plot is foiled and Benedict is dead. Melisandre's son has been vanished. But Melisandre's plot is not dead. Word has gone to Terra d'Ange that Queen Ysandra is dead and the rebel army is in revolt. And that brings us to Queen Ysandra's courage and love of duty. In the final kind of act of the book, Ysandra, who refused to bring a foreign army onto the soil of her native land to take her throne back, walks alone through a rebel army to confront the final traitor of the book. It is a singular act of love and duty and courage that saves a nation from civil war. In the end, the quiet mirror of Phaedra's journey isn't Melisandre, it's Ysandra, where Phaedra learns courage to suffer for love. Ysandra shows the courage to act for it. Her walk through the rebel army is one of the most striking Kierkegaardian images in the whole book. She chooses the ethical life, not in the rule-bound sense Jacqueline once embodied, but in the higher sense that Kierkegaard calls the task of becoming oneself through commitment. She doesn't fight for pleasure or even power. She acts out of love for her people and faith in the moral order that binds ruler and subject. In Works of Love, Kierkegaard writes, "To love is to presuppose love in others." That's exactly what Ysandra does. When she steps into that army alone, she presupposes that love still exists in the hearts of her people, that beneath the treachery, fear, and confusion, something in them will recognize her courage and respond with loyalty. That assumption is irrational, even absurd, and yet it saves the realm. It is also political love in the purest sense, what Hannah Arendt a century later would call the courage to appear before others and act without certainty. Ysandra doesn't command faith by decree. She invites it by risking herself first. She embodies the same paradox that defines Phaedra. To save others, she must become vulnerable. Carey closes the novel with that Kierkegaardian symmetry. Phaedra redeems through suffering, Ysandra through action. Both stand alone in faith, trusting love where reason offers no guarantees. Together, they prove that salvation, whether personal or political, only begins when someone loves enough to stake everything on it. And that's my long and deep thoughts on Kushiel's Chosen. Next month, we'll close out the Kushiel legacy with a deep dive into Kushiel's avatar and all the philosophical questions we wrestle with in that book. What do you think about my thesis that Chosen explores love through a Kierkegaardian absurdist lens? Let me know in the comments below. Oh, and lest you think that Kushiel is all we'll talk about on this channel, I've already started researching for the 4th video, where we'll talk about Netflix's series Blue Eye Samurai and the philosophical themes that it surfaces. So you have that to look forward to. See you next month, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up button.